Good afternoon on a Monday, of all things. I think this is a first for me to have split them up in 2 different days. All right, let's see. Today is June 17th, 2019. It is 4:30, and this is a Committee on Ways and Means. And we're going to open up with an invocation. If I could ask Councilmember Waring to provide us with an invocation, please.
Yes, please. Eternally Father, as we come before you, we thank you for all the many blessings that you have provided. We thank you for your amazing grace. We pray for the best of our intellect to come forth as we go about making decisions on behalf of all the citizens in the city of Charleston. We pray for our president, we pray for our governor, we pray for our mayor, and certainly all the council members around the table and our staff, because without them, it wouldn't be done. Give thanks to all the fathers and all the mothers that made them fathers in our country. We pray for our military, keep them safe, out of harm's way, even though they put their lives on the line for us. Bring them back home safely. That is our prayer, and we ask for that. In your name, let us all say, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Item 2 is the approval of minutes. We'll take April 23rd and 14th. Any discussion? Who is the second? Who? Okay. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 3 is bids and purchases. There's a motion.
So moved for those 8 items to be approved. I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 4 is the Mayor's Office on Children, Youth, and Families. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5 is Police Department, approval of the Paul Coverdale Forensic Science Improvement Grant. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 6 is Parks and Capital Projects, approval of 2019 Charleston County Greenbelt funds in the amount of $5.7 million. Is there we got a second? Okay.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 7, Stormwater Management approval, accept the grant award of $499,292. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 8, Stormwater Management approval of Spring Fishburne Phase 2 fee amendment number 16. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, and the ayes have it. Item 9 is Stormwater Management approval of the Spring Fishburne fee amendment number 17 with Davis and Floyd in the amount of $348,280. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Waring.
I'm going to ask, for additional oversight on this and some of the larger amendments to this contract, that some of these come before the Public Works Committee as opposed to just coming straight to Ways and Means, so we can get more detail and transparency on these things. A lot of times we have approved this almost automatically going forward. I think on this project we can no longer do that. Right now we're about to approve about $1.5 million, and I think if your lives depended on it, you couldn't say what it's for. So I'm going to ask that items 9 and 10 come before Public Works Committee and then come back to this committee.
All right. Mr. Fountain, anything you want to say with regard to that as we move forward? I know you sent an email out with a memo to council. Obviously, you could probably brief the Public Works Commission on that, or committee on that. Anything else you want to add before we press forward?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would, I'm sorry.
Matt, go ahead.
Yes, I'd say we did briefly address these at Public Works Utilities.
What, this?
Yes.
Now you and I had a conversation on that last week, but as far as all the council members, to my knowledge on Public Works, we didn't have a briefing on this 348,000 plus this 1.17 million.
Yes, that was one of the discussions during the project manager updates today, was if there were any questions regarding the amendments being proposed tonight.
The reason I didn't object at that time, because I knew it was already on Ways and Means Committee, and I would have this discussion on the floor. It wasn't on our agenda at Public Works, and the proper place to raise the issue, I thought, was at this Ways and Means Committee. So, we've had, I don't know, this is what, the 19th Amendment, and I guess 1 through 16, 17, maybe even 18, has almost been automatic. And I think in part, maybe that's how we got to this huge deficit that we're trying to find a way to answer. We just got to roll up our sleeves as an entire council and work hard on some of these things, because some of these things shouldn't be automatic. So that's my plea.
Councilman Gregory, and then I come to you, Councilman Seekins.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I mean, consistent with the rules of the body and the responsibilities of all the standing committees, I think what Councilman Waring is suggesting is consistent with those rules. And I don't think that it only necessarily applies to public service, okay? I think it applies to most of the committees. Sometimes instead of them going to the standing committee, it comes to the committee of the whole. It never actually has an opportunity to be vetted at the committee level so that the committee can make a recommendation to the body of a whole. So I would hope as we move forward, and it is going to be much, much more work for these committees, okay? It's not going to be a 10-minute, 15-minute meeting. We were elected to represent the interests of the people, and it takes longer than 10 or 15, 20 minutes to make decisions on many of the things that come before us. So I would hope that as we move forward, not just for public services, but for all things that relate to a specific committee before it comes to the body of the whole, consistent with our rules, that it comes before the committees first. I mean, we've been strengthening the committees over the last 3 years, no question, okay? But I would just like for us to just be consistent across the board.
Councilman Seekins, and I come.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm fine with that. Well, we've got Mr. Fountain here, and we have talked about it at the Budget Committee. It's another month before we come back. Can you just give us at least, because we're not all on the Public Works, tell us on where we are, particularly with number 9, just briefly, and then send it back to the committee? Yeah, well, 9 I'm particularly interested in, 10. Yeah.
I think 9's the one that probably causes the most
Right,
confusion.
I mean, because we talked about it at the Budget Committee workshop, and if you could just give us an overview, then we'll send it to Councilmember Waring for deliberation.
So item 9 has previously come to council, I believe, and been deferred,
Right.
which was the intent to bring it back to Ways and Means to address that item, and it had already been to council and been the subject of a number of workshops. Just as a caveat on item 10, is it appropriate to address item 10?
That's fine, yeah. I think that what probably caused most concern is 9, but we can address 10 while you're at it. It's fine,
And
yeah.
just as a procedural question, that item 10 is for the construction engineering inspection services as part of the ongoing construction project. So there is a clock on when the existing funding runs out for that, and there'd be a stop work on the project at that point. That clock probably expires some point in August or September, depending on burn rate. So just part of the intention of bringing it so early was to make sure we didn't have an issue we were running up against an area where we had to determine whether to continue work without authorization or whether to stop projects. So I just don't want to get us into that. Unintentionally get us back into that same issue on item 10, not on item 9, but on item 10.
Yeah, and I don't know that necessarily there's a lot of, like I said, I think most of the consternation that I and I think most of my colleagues are around 9. And so 10, I think, but it would be appropriate from a timing standpoint. I think between now and August, we should be able to get it in front of public safety and our public service and come back. So,
Just briefly, just give us an outline of where
oh
we are
yeah,
with
sorry,
that. Thank
please.
you.
Yes. Yep. So for
He didn't want to talk
Item-
about 9, but we'll ask him again. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
So for item 9, that is the amendment 17 of the project. So this was the item that's it's been discussed at some length with council members, but it is related to charges on the Phase 4 design portion of the project, that work that had been completed and then brought to council for approval. We've broken it into 5 tasks for clarity. The first task is basically a structural report for oyster mitigation work. It's approximately $4,950. That's part of the Citadel partnership project with our MOU with the Citadel, so that's part of our 50-50 cost split. It's for structural integrity of the section of the port that the oyster shells were stored on for their quarantine period, to make sure that that section of the port didn't collapse from having that level of oyster shell placed on top of it. So that was a time-sensitive issue, obviously, for that one. Item 2 is the mitigation projects themselves. So that's the development of that Citadel cost-shared agreement. That's where a 50-50 cost split with the Citadel Foundation for mitigation work they had going on as well. We've combined those two projects together. That included the agreement to use the State Sports Authority terminal and work on the Garin Creek project, the rebid for the salt marsh mitigation. That was approximately $19,635. The third item was value engineering that was requested, where basically a third-party team of the consultants were brought in from other offices to review the project to determine whether or not there were any other approaches that could have been used or cost savings methodologies that could have been used towards the project. That was $12,785. Task 4 was the movement of items from a potential Phase 5 into Phase 4, so that at the end of the Phase 4 construction period, which is the construction that we are just beginning at this point, we also have Phase 3 construction currently continuing, but Phase 4 is that wet well and the outfall construction of the Ashley River, that the project would be functional at the end of that phase. We'd be able to use it as a gravity system. It doesn't have the same capabilities for service, level of service, as it would with the pump station, but that there would at least be some functionality to it at that point in the project. That was approximately $132,375. And again, those items were basically that's costs that were moved from the Phase 5 into the Phase 4 that would have been expended either way. The item that I think created much of the discussion was item 5, which are the design revisions. Those were our items to address life cycle cost of operation, improving maintenance capabilities and efforts on the project. There were some adjustments for as-built conditions on a previous phase, basically trying to make the project perform better and be easier to maintain. That was an original, so this is the item where there's been the most negotiation. This has, at this point, that charge is roughly $178,000 as presented in the current change order request.
All right, let me go to Councilman Griffin, then Gregory, then Lewis.
I just want to refer back to our Public Works Committee again and just kind of explain to y'all how we get these updates, just so you know. Each one of our engineers or project managers comes up and gives a presentation of what projects they've currently been overseeing and gives us updates on that. But they don't do it in writing. So maybe going forward, the smart thing would be that we get a list and some bullet points, some summary items, because what happens is you have Mr. Kirk, who's a great person, who is very smart, who has a ton of projects that he's working on, and when you blow through a list within a few minutes, because we're trying to get through an agenda, you don't necessarily pick up on everything that's going to be on that night's agenda, and to kind of drive that point home. We're talking about Amendment 19 here. You can't dissect that kind of information within minutes or hours. It takes, several, hours to put together the plans to do this. It would be like asking us to dissect the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution within a matter of hours. There's a lot. It's a lot. And y'all put a lot of work into coming up with these presentations to us, and you put a lot of work into your memos and the other things that, like that document that you sent out today and these memos. So as council members relaying it to our constituents and making the decision to appropriate this kind of money, we need enough time to be able to dissect these things and ask questions. So on a project that has been up to this point, a failure in terms of the money spent and has needed a drastic amount of amendments and change orders, we are asking for more time, and I think that's the right thing to do, because we can't afford to make another bad decision on this project. So if it's got to come through Public Works and give us an opportunity to really dissect it, I think that would make this committee more informed as we move forward. So that's just my point. And if we can get a memo or a summary of the project so that we can see it and it be distributed to council, I think that would help, be very helpful. Thank you.
Go to Councilmember Gregory and Councilmember Lewis.
Just a couple of questions, Matt. Can you distinguish for me the difference between an amendment and a change order?
So these are amendments to a professional services contract. They're adjustments to the scoping of the contract. So that while we're on Amendment 19, the way the contract is set up is that many of those are new work that is proposed as we have each phase of the contract open. So for instance, the original contract may be to design phase 1, then there may be an amendment to come in and do the construction engineering inspection on phase 1, saying we've identified that amount of money. Then you might come back with an amendment to say, here is the design fee to do the design on phase 2. Then here is a construction engineering inspection amendment to do the construction engineering inspection on phase 2. So a number of those amendments are kind of anticipated as parts of increasing that scope of the project as you go along.
How do you verify the amounts of the requests for amendments or change orders?
So the amendments, the professional service amendments, are just like any contract we enter into with a professional service firm, that they're first evaluated the firm itself is evaluated based on qualifications. Then once you're into fee negotiation, you're negotiating off of scope primarily. You're saying what is the appropriate scope and what is the professional service fee appropriate for that work, and to determine how much time is necessary to perform those steps. Some of that is regulated under state law, and some of it is up to the project manager on how we do our negotiation work.
And at what point, if ever, does our budget office get involved in such negotiations and amendments?
So the budget office has to be involved with what funding is available, what allocation money is available within the project itself. And that's something that is very important for projects, because we need to make sure we have funding to actually design, build, and construct the project, not just do the design work. So we need to keep them involved as much as we can. I think we've built a good relationship with the finance department in that respect.
And do you do reductions sometime of what their request is?
Yes. Yes, that part of the negotiation first is saying, what do we think is appropriate for scoping? Where do we think we could have less of a service or more of a service? And there is a both addition and deduction generally in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Yes, my question is on number 7. Since Councilman Waring came up, said the committee really never discusses a lot of this stuff. I was going to wait until tomorrow night, but once this grant is submitted, we're supposed to be in by June the 23rd. Where do we go from here?
So the grant itself, this is just the letter to award the grant formally, or to us to accept the award of the grant. Separately, we have on the Capital Project Review Committee, which is the other committee for capital project work, that committee already has on its agenda the negotiated scope and contract with JMT, the consultant, to do the design work on the first phase of that project.
What's the time frame?
So that next CPR meeting, I believe, is the beginning of July. So the contract would go to that committee, be approved. Conceptually, it might go from that committee, if we can get it on the agenda in time, to Public Works Utilities. If not, it'll go to the July Public Works Utilities, no, the August Public Works Utilities at that point. Then from the August Public Works Utilities, it would come back to the Ways and Means, and then the Ways and Means, if it approves, would go to Council also in August, and then there'd be able to be an award hopefully by the end of August. If we don't have the Public Works Utility step, generally that would have been bringing it in the July meeting for approval at Council.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Jackson and Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to add my own observations, I guess, in terms of, I came obviously very late to the party of the spring Fishburne overall plan, as we were presented with the cost increase this past year and needing to come to grips with the fact that those increases are necessary on their face. And I think we did a pretty thorough job of asking all the right questions, getting detailed and thorough answers. We did have 2 workshops as far as I remember, and we are now getting very frequent reports from Mr. Kirk, the project manager, in detail about what is being done and what's expected to be done. The only thing I guess that, really in terms of listening, the missing link really probably is that the same type of reporting isn't done as an agenda item at Public Works. But certainly I think that we should be on record that we've gotten an amazing response from the staff once they understood how concerned and how responsible the council must be in the completion of this overall project. We were part of the reworking of agreeing that we could jump ahead, take parts off from Phase 5 and put it back on Phase 4 so that we would have a very functional system, not to the full extent that it's been planned with the actual pumps working, but we'd be able to have a drainage system that is going to serve our city well, as the mayor has been trying to communicate to the neighborhoods and the citizens. So I guess I just don't want to leave the impression that, we're still sort of where we were a year ago and feeling like we're not getting the kind of information that's important in our service to the city. I'm personally interested in everything that comes out of Public Works. I've been trying to put that on my agenda just to go and listen to their conversations on the decisions that they're making. So I fully support that everything that we agree to pay for at Ways and Means that has this kind of big ticket number should come through Public Works. But I really think we need to make the record clear that we're not complaining that we're not getting the information. The only thing that I hadn't seen until it came in our packet a week ago was the negotiation that we had authorized Mr. Fountain to make on our behalf to get the number as small as possible and still get the work for this amendment number 17. And I think, $150,000 off a bill that was started out at $505,000, I think is a pretty amazing accomplishment. So I thank you for that kind of negotiation. And I do hope that we can meet your deadlines. We certainly wouldn't want to have to put a halt to any progress that's being made on this project. So thank you.
Councilman Griffin, and then...
And I'll second your point, Councilmember Jackson. I'm in no way, shape, or form complaining about our staff. I'm just saying that we have to take the due diligence just as they do to draft memos and to pass us the information. We have to have the same amount of time to digest that information because ultimately it falls on us. We are the last line of defense. We're the ones that have to answer to the community. We're the ones who have to appropriate the money in the budget. And to that question, or to that statement, I have a question for Amy. I thought a couple months ago we had already appropriated all of the SIB money. Was this already allocated, this project right here, number 10, at that time? Because I thought that we didn't have any more SIB money left.
We have $88 million in SIB money that was going towards Phase 3 and Phase 4. So it is what it is. That's what we have.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
this one, for number 10, and all the numbers that I gave you for that phase, this is included in there.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Wait,
so we don't have any...
I'm sorry, that was actually number 9.
Oh.
All of that is in there. And then, but that as well, yeah. And then same for both, I'm sorry.
Because my question is just, we haven't gotten any more SIB money. We're capped out at the 88 million?
We have 88 million.
No, 88 million, it's...
All right, I'm going to go to Councilman Wagner because he hadn't had a chance to speak, and I'll come back to Councilman Waring.
Did I answer the question? You want me? No. Okay.
I'm going to make a comment and then we'll ask the question, which, hey, I'll tell you how my day went today. At about 11, maybe.
Councilman Wagner, you can hear very well. You can pull that a little bit closer to you.
Ah.
Thank you.
I'd love to. All right. About 11:50, I left my office this morning and went and met somebody for lunch. I finished at 1, jumped in my car, came to town as quick as I could just to be at Public Works at 1:30. I noticed the date on this is 11:56 a.m. on your email. And the first time I saw it, of course, was when I sat here, because I wasn't nowhere where I could see it. The purpose of the comment is very similar to what you're hearing from everybody else. Now, how am I supposed to digest something if I haven't seen it? And that is in essence what happened when we walked in there. We hadn't seen it. And in my quick perusal, you're telling me this is the engineering contract. These are the guys that are helping us write our change orders. That's what they do, and they're helping us with our inspection. And so I see the word more than one time in here, acceleration. Well, acceleration is, hey, I got to have my car back by 4, I'll give you extra $50. If you're talking to your mechanic, you know, if you're in line. And I'm having a little bit of a problem understanding how we accelerate an engineering contract if it's an engineering contract for a specific period of time. That's the first thing. I also don't know how we delay it. So in all the years I was in contracts, that's the two items that we look really close at. Who said, go ahead, we got to have it tomorrow, here's the extra dollars. That's the first question. That's on the acceleration side. And on the delay, why was it delayed? Well, we had a rainstorm. Well, the federal government believes that if you live in an area that has 13 inches of rain and 12 days a month, in the month of July that rains, it's not a delay. It should be expected, because that's normal. And so, anytime I see those two words, I get worried, especially in something that is not a physical thing that's relying on weather or, you know, something like that. If a hurricane comes and we close down, is that a delay? No, that's a weather event. That's an act of God. But should we pay somebody for it? If somebody puts something in upside down or backwards, do we have to pay for him to fix it? Or is that his responsibility? And I think what we're kind of looking at is we got a tremendous overrun on the whole problem here. And we're running way behind schedule. And, you know, and so I think, at least in my part, I know we have a great staff. I know these guys. But you got to wonder how this is occurring, and, you know, who's signing off on delays? Who's signing off on acceleration? Who's given the order to accelerate the contract? So that should be an amendment in and of itself to the contract if you accelerate. So that's kind of the area I'm at, and, you know, not having the chance to look at it is one story, and not understanding what you guys are looking at is another part of the story. And it took, I know it took more than about 5 minutes for you to get all those documents together and do your analysis. So I think I would speak pretty much for us, but, you know, give us a shot at it. I mean, you know, I'm just going to use a quote from the movie, but that's not appropriate. But, bottom line, you know, let's get this thing right. I mean, from here out, we've got to watch it. We're going to run out of money if we don't. And that's what we're asking for, and Public Works is the place to do it. Thank you.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. I think Councilman Wagner actually touched on it, but Councilwoman Jackson said about the good job, and I do second that, Matt, you're doing a good job. But on the, take for example, amendment number 19. One of the things you alluded to was a change in the scope. And if you have a change in the scope of the work, obviously the professional services will change. Can any councilman around this table tell me what was the change in the scope of this drainage project that precipitated this $1.17 million change in professional services? In other words, the scope of the project is being changed, altered from the original concept. That's being approved, and we getting the the request to approve the professional services on that consultant part of it. Who approved the change of the scope of the work? That gets done, and we don't even know why does the original design no longer will work, and why we need to have it done. See, that's the kind of specifics we are not getting. And we're not going to get that in a Ways and Means report, and we're not going to get that in a summary, frankly, from Mr. Kirk, with all due respect. Anybody who sat in those meetings, you're not going to get that kind of specific. When that change to the scope came through, some of that information needs to be pushed out to the mayor and council, because there's a domino effect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Just to respond to that, that one was addressed in great detail at the Budget Ad Hoc Committee. I believe, actually, you might have been absent that day, Councilman. But that was something we discussed in great detail of what...
Excuse me, that
Yes.
means, how many councilmen were attended at that Budget Ad Hoc Committee meeting? 4? So we have 4 people around this table that know the specifics of that change. It's still not a majority of council. And I'm telling you, when you got a $40 million overrun, all of us need to go to work. That's all I'm saying.
So just for clarity, did you want me to bring them into Ways and Means as the majority of council, or to Public Works Utilities with the sub-membership of council?
When the scope is proposed, who gets that information?
So the scope will come in through the project manager.
Okay. And when that decision gets made, who makes the decision to change the scope?
So for Amendment 19...
In general, who has the bizarre authority to say, we approve that change?
Right, it comes to Ways and Means and then to City Council for approval.
Okay. And when that request comes in, I think that information needs to come out to council and to the mayor, of course. Okay. What we are getting is after the fact approval, basically. We've already approved this, the change of the scope. Now we want y'all to approve somebody to design the scope, and the change in the scope, and we don't even know why the scope needed to be changed. See, one of the concerns that I have is I really and truly believe that this project would have drained efficiently if built the way it was originally built, or originally designed, I should say, not built. Now we've had a number of changes along the way, and did those changes have to be made, or this thing wasn't going to work? I just don't believe that this project was originally designed not to work. We have too many other ones that came prior to that did. So when these changes come through to the scope, in my opinion, sometimes that's optional. And if it's optional, we should have the right to say yay or nay. Right now, it's being placed to us as, if we don't approve it, we're holding up the project, running up the cost, and some of these things, maybe, I still drive my Ford truck. And I go out there right now and turn that key's gonna kick over, as it was originally designed. They got new Ford trucks out there, much prettier than the one I have, but I choose not to get that new Ford truck. I still drive my old Ford truck. So, I'm just saying, some of the changes of these scopes, the mayor as well as all 12 council people need to have the knowledge to say, do we want that change or not? Right now, we're not in a position with enough information. That's not your fault. That's the way this process has been. The process has to change. Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Thank you, Mr. Chief.
Mr. Mayor, and then I'll come back to Councilman Shea.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this discussion here today. And in fact, part of all this is about changing our process to the better. And I think Mr. Fountain is a breath of fresh air in that regard. And to Mr. Gregory's remarks, I feel like I've tried in a sincere way to bring more things to the standing committees over the last few years. And I'm very happy to take these 2 amendments back to Public Service Committee and fully vet every aspect of it. That being said, there has been a lot of conversation about particularly number 9, and I'll concur with Councilmember Jackson's observation that Matt Fountain has done a terrific job negotiating. And y'all probably saw him over there. Mike Horton is here with Davis and Floyd, and had come prepared to answer any questions. And we also met recently with his boss, Mr. Davis, Stephen Davis, and you know, they're trying to do everything in a collaborative way, given a 40-year relationship with the city, to try to resolve this past issue and move forward in a very good way. Now, that being said, I do want to, and maybe, Mr. Chairman, we just should chat a little bit before each agenda, because like the question that Councilmember Lewis brought up, you know, we all want to move forward as quickly as we can with Hughie and King Street project. And, you know, at this point, really the next thing after the vetting of the RFP is just to bring it to Ways and Means. I mean, it would seem to me that's a case that we don't really need the extra step of going back to public service before it comes to Ways and Means. We all concur. That project's on our list. We want to move it forward. If the next step is to have a contract with the engineering firm to do the final design so we can get the project moving, I mean, I don't know what really needs to be vetted in that regard at this point with public service. So maybe, Mr. Chairman, we could just have a conversation about some of these matters and make some decisions about going for a deeper conversation at public service versus going for approval for Ways and Means or repair of some archway or whatever. So anyway, I just thought I would share that and thank Davis and Floyd for the efforts they've made recently to resolve this matter with us, and I look forward to digging in on it at the next public service meeting. Thank you.
Councilman Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to go back to a conversation we had several months ago when this issue was coming up and brewing in front of us on this project. And I made a point that the problem with this is with a lack of communication. And we were not brought up to speed on this thing from time to time. And what I'm noticing on item number 10, attached to the request is a letter from Davis and Floyd dated May 16, 2019. And I don't want to speak for Councilmember Waring on this, but it would seem to me that since we had some knowledge about this request for over a month ago, May 16th, that maybe at that particular point in time, a conversation should have been had between the chairman of our Public Works Committee and Mr. Fountain to put us on notice that this was going to come up at some point in the immediate future. The whole problem with this is that we're not getting enough information in advance to understand what we're doing. We're talking about a huge project at $1 million+ that we are about to vote on to spend. We all want this project to be completed. We want this project to be successful. We want to do it with our stewardship obligations to making sure this money is being spent appropriately and in the right way, but the project is being completed. So we don't want to add layers and layers of bureaucracy to delay this thing, but I have said this several times. It's a matter of communication. It's a matter of us getting the information as fast as we can and efficiently as we can. And so perhaps maybe when we have these communications that at least our council chair is made aware of what's going on, he has a little bit ahead of the curve of what is taking place with this request so that he knows what's going on or she knows what's going on with this request. We could be better informed about it. Maybe he can communicate to us what's taking place, or that at least when it comes up for discussion, we have some idea of what this is all about. But at least a month before it comes before our committees, we were aware this request is going to hit the pipeline. And I know there's a lot of work that has to be done in the meantime with that, but at least we have some idea, we can start asking questions before it comes up for our, I hate to say it this way, a last minute request. But communication on this thing is a critical component of making sure this is successful. So what I would recommend is that there's better communication between our chair of the Public Works Committee and our director so that we know these things as far in advance as we possibly can, so at least we know what's taking place with this stuff, and we're not having this discussion again in a month from now.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I agree with everything my colleague just said, but again, back to the question of who approves the changes of the scope to a project. Who's actually making that decision, Mr. Mayor? Right now, I don't know. So when change to the scope that involved amendment number 19, who actually made that decision that we should move forward with this change to the scope of the project? I'm asking.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Fountain answered that correctly. It's council. And here's a case in number 9, item number 9, where we all know we're talking about something after the fact.
Right.
And number 10, what Mr. Fountain was saying, he's bringing this forward so it's before the fact, and we are in fact, quote, changing the scope. Now, it's mostly just a matter of timing, forced upon us by delay from the actual, the company that's down there drilling and lining the tunnel. They're behind schedule. There's no question about it. So now it's going to take longer for Davis and Floyd to be the babysitter and look after their work and do their CEI services that go along with the construction. But Davis and Floyd's original end date was, I believe, July 5th of next month. So is it a change of scope, or is it just dealing with reality that the construction company got?
So I guess, Mr. Fountain, was the job supposed to go one way, and we said no, it needs to go to the left, and the engineer now says it has to go to the right, and then so what was the actual change order?
So Amendment 19 is just an extension of an existing service. There's no change in scope associated with that task. It is just that the original construction contract was scheduled to end in July, so the costing was phased through July. There have been delays to the project that has also extended the amount of time by reducing the burn rate on the CE&I work, that we now have funding through August to early September, depending on what the final burn rate is. The current construction schedule for phase 3 projects a finish date between March and May of 2020. So this is to extend the existing services to cover that extra time frame. There's a discussion of liquidated damages that are associated with the contractor being over his schedule that is involved within that. It's slightly more complex, but all this is just the extension of the existing construction engineering inspection work to observe the contractor and make sure it's being performed under contract and in scope out to that new end date for the construction contract.
Good. Now that was helpful. So there was no change to the actual project itself. This is extending of professional services. So when the project was delayed, explain to me or us how Davis and Floyd was burning money when the contract was delayed. What advice of professional services was being rendered when the project was delayed?
So some of the delay is why that original budget went from July to the August-September period. Why they're not out of money until that August-September period instead of the July period is that they were able to not expend funds during some of the delay. For instance, some of the delay is a weather-related delay. The contract does account for weather. It has a specific number of days within months for contract weather delays. If you have more weather delays than what's in the contract, then there's an allowance within the contract to extend your contract time. So those amounts, there's not much money expended during those days because the project is generally on hold. There might be a minor inspection, but that's why the current funding does stretch longer than originally anticipated. The additional delays are partially due to the contractor not completing the project at the rate that the contractor had projected to complete the project. That's where the liquidated damages would come in. Liquidated damages are a fee that the contractor has to pay.
I got you.
Didn't know if any other council members had any questions about it. There are also just additional changes with the project. There was a claim from the contractor earlier in the project that had some days associated with it, and then there are pending claims on the contract, as is somewhat usual with a large contract, that could result in potential additional days. Plus, there's a contractor himself being behind schedule and struggling with the actual work.
Thank you.
Councilman Seekings and Griffin.
Just quickly, and you touched on it very briefly, and we talked about it, I think, at the Budget Committee, but if we are successful in collecting the contractually set out liquidated damages, how much of this change order will be covered by the liquidated damages provision that we get money, essentially back? Or
There's a potential for up to $700,000 depending upon the actual negotiation.
So we'll have some savings off this $1,000,011, but potentially.
Correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilman Griffin.
Councilmember Waring, knowing all of that, are you okay to push these two forward to vote on these tonight, or do you want to defer them still to words?
I want that process to change, that these things go through public.
So you want to start with these two?
That's right. And, we got more information in this little Q&A. Just think if we had that through Public Works on the front end. Thanks.
Ms. Fountain?
And just while we're discussing schedule purposes, I mean, part of the reason Amendment 19 is on the agenda tonight, despite being on a previous date on the cover letter, is because Amendment 19 had to go through the Capital Review Committee prior to being able to come to Ways and Means for council approval. So that's why you're seeing that delay on the contract, is right now we're on monthly meetings, so you have to hit the previous Capital Review meeting prior to being able to come to the Ways and Means agenda meeting. And then we just need to make sure if we set it up on Public Works Utilities, I don't know whether we'll have time to move it to the Ways and Means agenda on the following night, or if we have to shift that meeting back in order to be able to get it on the publicly noticed agenda. That'd be a question for Corporation Council probably, just in what, I know we want to move things forward quickly, but we also want to make sure we're having due diligence, just making sure we understand what the repercussions are.
Councilmember Waring, the one thing that I wanted to mention is under the current procedures, the Public Works and Utilities, coordinates with different departments and reports out its information directly to City Council. Ways and Means is the committee that makes decisions on financing, and so what we have to be thinking about is maybe backing up, and I'm just trying to think out loud, backing up the Public Works and Utilities meetings so that if you have recommendations on financial matters, these contracts, for example, we've got to have enough time to then add them onto the agenda for Ways and Means.
I
mean, we can do that.
We need to coordinate all of that. That's
exactly. We'll just need to probably move the dates of Public Works and Utilities back so that if there are contracts in there that need some approvals from the committee, we've got to do it early enough so that it then can get on the next City Council agenda, so we're not talking about a 2-month
I'm 100% in agreement with that. Let me tell you how flexible I am. They tell me when the meeting's held. I don't ask them when the meeting, they tell me. Okay, I don't give them a date. They tell me the date, and I work with that date.
And I just checked the rules, and it doesn't require Public Works and Utilities to meet on any particular day. So, if council's inclined, we would maybe change how we're currently doing things and back up Public Works and Utilities, if that's what council wants to do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilman Wagner.
Yep, I don't know why, I just heard this word, and I've never heard it before. Who is the Capital Review Committee? And are there any council members associated with it? And oh, by the way, where do we find the meeting notes?
So it's actually Capital Projects Review Committee. It's just an internal meeting for us to talk about the projects, ensure the funding is there, and it's just an internal meeting that we have. And then those contracts go to Ways and Means on the agenda.
Okay, but that's what keeps it from getting to us any quicker.
Well, sometimes in the summertime, it's just a little hard with the way that the meetings are scheduled, but we'll work it all out.
If something goes wrong, it shouldn't be an immediate, well, we'll wait 30 days before we do it. That's like, if something goes wrong, one of those shafts, well, we had one shaft kind of collapsed one time.
And we can have special meetings if we need to. We'll work it out.
And that's kind of that's where I'm going. Just didn't know who that was. Thank you.
Councilman Shade.
I just want a clarification. So the contract end date is July 5th, 2019. What is the effect if we don't approve this tonight?
When's our next meeting?
I think what Mr. Fountain was saying was because Davis and Floyd There were some rain dates and some other dates. They haven't used up all the money for their CE&I. It probably wouldn't run out until late August or September. So it would be fine for us to approve this extension in July.
All right.
I just want to make sure I was clear on that, Mr. Mayor, that I heard something that we're about to run out of time, so I just want to make sure we're okay. We don't get ourselves in legal hot water if we don't vote on it tonight. Wait a minute, I want to get a response.
So it is not it's not a contractual end date. That was the original contractual end date for the construction contract that the professional services were providing services to. The end date of the construction contract has been extended due to those additional contract days from claims and weather days. So it's the Davis and Floyd work can continue until the funds run out rather than a specific date within that contract.
Okay, let's make sure we're clear on that. Thank you.
All right, so I was just getting clarity. So if it is the desire of this body, we are going to need a motion to defer and send it to Public Works. All right. Okay.
I want to speak to that motion just very quickly. I just want to make sure if we're doing this, that we're going to set up a framework that it's going to get through committee, get to Ways and Means, get to here, and so we can get this off our plate, get Davis and Floyd back in line if that's what's going to happen, and get on with it. Okay? I mean, we just can't leave this out there floating. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to them. We need to get some closure on this. I agree that it should go through Councilmember Waring's committee, but please set up a framework so we get it back to us in July.
All right. I'm gonna, if I can, I'm going to make a couple quick comments. And I agree 100% with Councilman Waring, and this is what needs to happen. The challenge we have, and I read the memo that Mr. Fountain provided to us, and it was sent, I was, like most of y'all, I was rushing down here, so I didn't get a chance to go through it really in depth, but I did get a chance to review. But the gist of it was, if I read it correctly, that what we have is a pattern of a wrongdoing over time that has allowed for contractors, in this case Davis and Floyd, to have some comfort that if they were to do work based upon a staff member saying, yes, we'll take care of you and we'll get you paid, that that's sort of been the norm. And that is wrong. And by contract, that is wrong. And Davis and Floyd knows that, and so do we. What we have is we did not find out about all these other issues that were brought to our attention by Mr. Fountain, and I appreciate the homework he did. Welcome to the city, by the way. I'm sure you didn't know you were getting involved in this right off the rip. But what we found was that only when it came to this committee and we started asking a couple additional questions, because we found out we had a $40 million shortfall on a project. This is the largest drainage project that we've ever undertaken in the city of Charleston. And that's only because this body stopped. Ways and Means said, wait a minute, what's going on? We probably should have done this years ago, but we didn't. So here now we have this massive void in finance to be able to take care of this, and subsequently we're $100 million into a project we can't stop. We have to keep moving forward. So this is, in my mind, not necessarily specific of an issue that we need to be focused on from just a project level. This, in my mind, is the fear I have is that we have a problem across other issues and other projects within the city that we may or may not know about. Because quite candidly, some of these enhancements that were talked about, I can't tell you that I recall them coming forward to council. And so if we do have folks within our departments that are making decisions that step outside of the bounds of the contract and the authority that they have, that's a problem. And so it's incumbent upon this body, I think, to make sure that moving forward, we're watching everything a little more tightly to ensure that we don't have this occur again. Because if we are so lucky to find the $400 million to do Calhoun West, I don't even want to think what that shortfall would look like if we don't get this right. So With that, I don't think there's any more comments or concerns. I'm going to call for the question. Again, the motion on the floor is to defer and send this back to Public Works to the next appropriate meeting date. That's for 9 and 10. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 11 is the capital projects. That's for Longborough Dock. Any discussion?
About that?
Yes, Councilman Seekins.
We're now in the post-litigation phase. Where are we with that park and everything? Do we have everything in place, all agreements? Is that all good and up and running?
We're going to report on that tomorrow at council meeting. We discussed it in our recreation committee meeting today.
Okay, and what we're doing here is consonant and consistent with all the agreements we've got in place? We're okay with that?
Right.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good enough? Okay. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 12 is budget, finance, revenue collections, an ordinance amendment for the administration of finance fiscal procedures to add a new section. Any discussion? And this is associated with a waiver of fees for city projects. I just had one. And I'm not sure if legal counsel or who maybe can give some guidance on this. One of the language itself sort of gave some indication that staff, I think it spoke to city projects, but it almost looked like it didn't have to be a wholly sponsored city project. That it could be something that was sponsored maybe by other parties involved. And I just want to make sure that we don't find ourselves, again, I trust our staff, but I don't want to find another $40 million hole getting created somewhere because we put too much out there and didn't give some guardrails a little tight enough.
Sure, that's a good question. I think the intent is for it to cover any city-owned projects, so it would be either paying for it completely or substantially. We didn't want to include just partially funded by the city because that might get into some other types of projects where we might be helping out with a grant or something and then they were trying to waive the fees for something that we were minimally involved in, so we changed the language to substantially.
Okay.
But there are I wanted to be able to cover situations where we're getting partial grant funding from other sources, like maybe FEMA pays 75% of a project and we're only paying 25%. But, you know, just to make it so that it is a city-controlled, city-owned type of project. And I know that reading just the word substantially might be confusing and subject to some interpretation, and that refers back to the CFO having the final say in what projects do get the waiver or not. So it would require a letter from our CFO to say that that particular project has the fees waived.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, all those in favor signify by saying, oh, sorry, Councilman Waring?
Don't leave, please. On the tenant, Family Circle Tenant Center, we enter into this lease. They're going to do an expansion to the stadium. Will that fall under this, or will they have to buy a building permit to do that construction? Because it's a city-owned property, we still own it, we leased it to them.
If it's a city-leased project, I mean, it depends on if the city is really in control of the actual project that's being done. So it's not really triggered by the fact that it's a city-owned property. It's more whether or not the project is funded by the city or not. And so I don't know exactly what the details of that particular project are going to be. But again, the CFO will be able to review each of these as it comes through and determine whether or not this would be considered a city project or not. It's going to be something that involves mostly city funds. So if it's a private developer funding most of it, then that would not be considered as part of what this is geared for.
Yes, but we're clear on that.
And that project in particular is being funded almost, actually, I think, completely privately.
100% privately, then it would not be not be eligible for the waiver.
I think it's up to $9 million that they are going to be funding and be in charge of the construction and the renovation. So that would not be applicable to the fee waiver.
All right.
The intent is really just to help our staff to not have to move funds around the city just from one, because it's all, you know, it's really just to help when we're actually managing the projects ourselves.
All right, thank you all. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 13 is request authorization for the mayor to execute the tree protection agreement. And yes, Councilman Rashid.
We discussed at our public works committee meeting on this document, make a small amendment to on page 7 at 6.2.2 on the membership. Under B, a member of city council, to include that city council will be a member of the public works committee.
Okay.
With all due respect, this is a different group.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That will come up during the real estate report.
That's my fault.
This is a agreement to fund this, engineering study to do the underground and the Riverland Terrace study.
I don't think I know.
But we appreciate your comments nonetheless.
13 Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I would have had myself.
No, you were right.
You were right.
Oh, he's right. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend my motion to include Councilman Shea in support.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so
I'll take my credit for that one.
who seconded that motion? So you accept that amendment?
He's over there, I see him.
Okay. You want to be heard, Councilman Shear?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Councilman Moody?
Yeah, I just want to be sure, this is the group that is being put together, 9 members, and all we're really changing here is that the council member is a public works member rather than just a member of council. Got it.
All right. If there's no more discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 14 is approval of River Landing Terrace engineering study, and this one would be for the underground wiring. Sorry, no problem. All right, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Item 15 is Parks and Capital Projects, approval of construction contract with Hill Construction Services in amount of $8,958,507 for the construction of the Daniel Island Recreation
Mr.
Center.
Chairman, I move for approval, but I move to filibuster this one for a couple of
Thank you
days.
very little.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. And if I could just take one moment and thank you all. This project has been, as y'all know, a work in progress for 12 of my years here on council, and I can assure you that it would not have happened without y'all's support and the support of the mayor and staff, and so thank y'all very much. I do sincerely appreciate y'all's help and support on getting this done, and I know and I'm confident the residents of Daniel Island will also appreciate and thank y'all and help for all your help and support. So thank y'all. All right, item 16 is Committee on Real Estate. Chairman Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just report, there's several items on here. Item A was deferred, and item E was deferred. Those two were not ready. The rest of the items, I'll just run right through them. Item B was that agreement on the 22 West Edge was approved. Item C, the police department lease on the James Island substation was approved. Item D, the Carter use of that property at Sumar Street was not approved. That was voted down, and so the recommendation of the committee would be not to approve that. Item F, that's at Washington Park. We basically asked the legal staff to go back and bring us a written contract that included the numbers that we talked about. So we didn't really vote on a number, but we just told them to go back and bring us a contract for the amount that we discussed. And then the two annexation items were approved. So we recommend all of those things from the Real Estate Committee. The two deferrals that were approved, one denial, and the rest were approved.
All right. Any discussion? Councilor Shade?
I think out of abundance of caution on item G, number 2, I need to recuse myself from that.
Yes.
Well, you know, I have to point out, I saw not only that, but I saw the first one there was Carol L. Jackson Powell. I wasn't sure if there was a... She didn't...
They gave me pause for that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
We talked about it.
We'd want to make sure y'all were all annexed in the city to be sitting around the table here. Yeah, right. All right. Any further discussion?
Just let the record, the minutes reflect that I'm supporting a project at West Edge because this project is really a benefit to the city. I'm for more of this. I don't want that.
Public's got it.
That's exactly right.
Does everybody realize that Councilman Lewis loves the puppets over there?
Where did this come from? He's spreading bad news. I've been in public twice.
We'll take that as fake news. Don't you worry about that. I'm going to make one quick comment, if I can, about item B, about the West Edge. And I've been consistent from day one, and I'm going to continue to be consistent. I voted against it in the Real Estate Committee. I do want to just say, for the record, that my not approving of the item has nothing to do with the Digital Corridor and their work, and it certainly has nothing to do with Matt Froelich and the work he was doing. They've done a yeoman's job to try to find a bailout for this very, what I would call, poor decision process that happened a number of years ago. I would have hoped that we might have an opportunity to limit our exposure. Unfortunately, now it looks like our exposure is now going to grow to almost $2 million of taxpayers' dollars, which it gives me great pause. But we are where we are, and it sounds like, unfortunately, this go-around I might be alone. I was hoping for one vote.
You're not alone. But it's a very worthy project that we are supporting there. But you're not alone. You don't have to vote on nothing else to West.
Very good. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, and if you just carry forward in my name. All right, if there's no more business to come before the committee, I think we will stand adjourned. Thank you all.